2005 with Benny Solis, John Solis, and he was in the U.S. Navy during World War II. So we'll go ahead and get started. Can you tell me your service number?
Service number is 338-5130, and I enlisted in the U.S. Navy right after I graduated out of high school, and I did my training in Farragut, Idaho, and after a 15-day leave, I was sent to Bremerton, Washington. That's a Puget Sound Navy Yard in Bremerton, and I did a little duty there for maybe about 5 or 6 weeks, and then they sent me aboard the USS Laws DD-558. It was a newly commissioned destroyer, and we did our shakedown cruise training in around Seattle and Bremerton in the waters there. And after a short time we went to Pearl, did a little bit more training. That was it already. We're into 1944, February 44. We darkened ship and headed into the Pacific waters, and we was with Task Force 58 and 38, and we seen duty around the Marshalls, Ulithi, Anahuac Islands in the Marshalls. We first drew enemy blood when we shore bombarded at Saipan, and you might be familiar with the Great Turkey Shoot. The aircraft carriers knocked down dozens, and along with the fleet, knocked down dozens of Japanese planes. And we seen action at Iwo Jima, and we was also at the Philippines, Battle of Philippine Sea. And one incident that stands out in my mind was when we was with the task force. It'd either be task force under Nimitz, task force 38 or task force 58. And the scout planes from the flat tops picked up, we was around the Philippines, and task force picked up, the scout planes picked up some tankers and oilers around Mindanao, and they sent the planes off of the flat tops to knock them off. And when they was done firing at them and had them in bad situation, they sent in 2 cruisers and 4 destroyers, and ours was one of the destroyers that went into the Mindanao to finish off the ships. And it was really kind of sickening because these ships was all halfway sunk, and there's a lot of Japs floating in the water and everything. And I remember the captain, my battle station was in number 5 gun. I was a powderman, and we opened our hatches because we'd cease fire, and they was laying all over in the water, you know, Japs and everything. And the captain gave an order on a PA system not to fire at any of the Japs in the water. And we had right at midships off of our gun mount was some 20 millimeters, and a guy by the name of George was strapped to this 20 millimeter, you know, and he opened fire on about 5 or 6 of them, and the captain came down and pulled him off of that 20 millimeter. And he was a boatswain first class, and he did go up before the captain's mast, and they broke him down, you know, for that. But that's the incident that sticks out in my mind to this day. I told the same story when we was at the memorial in Washington. But then later on, after the Battle of Philippine Sea, the Japs, their fleet was just about demoralized, and they went to the Kamikaze plane, and that's where the ships, a lot of the destroyers, because they didn't have they weren't built as strong as a flat top or a battleship, and they were a lot smaller, and a lot of our ships really got wiped out at the Kamikaze. As a matter of time, one time we was going to relieve we was in a 55th squadron. That's like 7 destroyers. That's not all the destroyers. That's just that group of destroyers, and ours is the only one that came back to the States. But when we went to relieve the Callahan, another destroyer, it was getting orders to go back to Uncle Sugar, and it got hit by a Kamikaze, and we picked up survivors. Another strong, tough situation was the typhoons. We was in two of them, and one time Nimitz gave us orders to go way up into the China Sea so we wouldn't be get out of this here. You know, if you ever seen waters, you know what the trying to think of the name of that movie, where it shows the waters, how strong they are and everything. I can't think of it.
Perfect Storm.
Yeah, if you've seen the movie The Perfect Storm, you would see what kind of waters you're really in. It seems like you're way down in a hole and the water's all up around you, you know. And anyway, we lost 2 destroyers, cracked in half in there, and we picked up survivors off of them, you know. And none of them was alive because, I mean, that's what the water does to them. And the other incident was one time, I'm going way back to the States again because this is when the war was already over and we came back to the States. And we was in San Francisco and it was having like open day, and Laws was picked to show its, you know, its guns and torpedoes and depth charges and ash cans and all that. And this guy, I wasn't on duty by the officer of the deck, but this old guy come up to the gangplank, and he said to the guy at midships, he says, "What kind of ship is this?" And he says, "It's a destroyer." He says, "Does it go underwater?" And the guy at midships says, "No, it doesn't, but sometimes it does." It's not supposed to, but sometimes it does, is what he told him. And when I heard this story, I really had to crack up on it, because when you're out in a tough sea, that ship does go underwater. The bow, it just quivers down under the water, you know, and everything. So anyway, Ralph and I was talking about it downstairs a little while ago. We was talking about the equator. Well, we crossed it, and Ralph says, that is really a tradition. They go all out when you get initiated. So we crossed it twice, but we really got a licking because 90% of the guys on our ship was off the USS Strong, which was sunk in the Battle of Kula Gulf. That was before my time, but that was one around Guadalcanal. And all of them guys came on to Laws. So when we got initiated the first time, it was like if you haven't crossed the equator, if you cross the equator, you're a shellback, and if you haven't crossed it, you're a pollywog. And so I was a pollywog, and I really got initiation. I mean, they really take you through it.
What they do?
They first of all, 2 or 3 days ahead of time, I'm going around and say, "What are you making all these switches and paddles, leather straps and all that for?" And he says, "Well, if you haven't heard, we're going to cross the equator." I says, "So what?" He says, "So what? That's a tradition. You know, Davy Jones ain't going to let you cross this equator without getting initiated. You know, they give you a certificate, the whole 9 yards. They give you everything. And they put some kind of false accusation against you, say that you're guilty of a certain thing, you know." Anyway, I still got the certificate. But anyway, it is, and then that day, and I mean, you can see the whole fleet. Like, they take these real big water hose nozzle, they wire them together, and if you're an officer, if you haven't crossed the equator, you're a pollywog and you're going to get initiated. I don't care if you're the captain. It just so happened our Captain Lester Wood was a shellback. But they wire these together and make you act like they're binoculars, you know, and then they'll tell you to act like a dog and bark and act like you're going on that post. They call it a stanchion in the Navy. And act like you're going on it, you know. They did all these different things, and you could look out in the fleet and you know you're in war and you say, this ain't happening.
Yeah.
And It is. You're getting initiated. And anyway, they got a guy on a superstructure and they're squirting water on you. You do not have any clothes on. And you're on your hands and knees and they're paddling you as you go through. And the last thing they do, they set you in a garbage can full of slop and you don't have no clothes on. They give you a grease job for you want a haircut, and they cut your hair all different directions. They put grease in your hair. And then they got a big canvas thing with water. And two big guys, are dunking you in there. And this one guy, he was an Italian from New York. And they say, what are you? What are you? And he'd come up, he'd say, I'm a sailor. Down under he'd go again. You're supposed to say, you're a shellback now. See, because you've been initiated.
Sure.
And this guy keeps saying, please somebody tell me, what am I? He says, because he's about drowning, you know. So I knew when they started dunking me, I'm a shellback. So anyway, crossing the equator is quite an experience, and I don't know if we should cut it at this point. You know,
Well, I have some questions. You know, if
Okay.
you okay, let's go back to I guess the beginning. Where were you when you heard about Pearl Harbor? I mean, everyone knows where they were. Where were you at when you heard about Pearl
I can
Harbor?
tell you, my friend Manuel, they called him A.B. Gonzalez. We was in Carlisle at the Ritz Theater at a matinee, and we was hitchhiking back to Beckamar, which is 3 miles down the road on Route 50. And Adolph
This is in
Tyler,
Illinois, right? Carlisle or Beckham, Illinois, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, Adolph Tyler, he had a Model A coupe. You know, we're talking. This is 43, and he says we got in a car. The first thing he says, "Did you know that Pearl Harbor was bombed?" And we look at one another and we say, "Where's Pearl Harbor?" You know, no lying. You know, I didn't know. I never heard about Pearl Harbor.
How
at
old
that
were you
point.
at the time?
I was. Let's see. That was 43. No, wait a minute. No, that was 40.
41.
That was 41.
Right.
So I was 15.
15 years old.
Yeah, I was 15 because I didn't know a thing about Pearl Harbor. But that's where he was, and they always say, you know, like when Kennedy was assassinated, I can tell you where I was. Something big like that, it sticks out in your mind.
Did it have what sort of effect did it have on your family and yourself? I mean, was it devastating, or once you realized the gravity of what had happened? I mean,
Well, not right away, but then when we started reading the papers, you know, and we seen all the sailors that was killed in the waters, you know, and it was a sneak attack, pardon, and that there kind of worked on your family. But then we was also, because this is 41, I was for a minute I was putting 41 and 43 together, you know, because that's when I went in. I had to think what I was going to say, but we was on big scrap drives, you know, right at the high school. We pile all our scrap and everything right in front of the flagpole there at Beckamar High School.
so they used that to recycle for the war effort and everything.
Yeah.
So did you have a lot of your high school friends that went into the military also?
Yeah, Ralph and I was talking about it downstairs. See, I think Ralph, I don't know, I'm not sure. I think he lived in Carlisle, but I played basketball against Billy Thomas and Jim Cook. Jim Cook originally was from Beckamar, and they were at Iwo Jima, and we shore bombarded there. And it was well, I was still in the onboard ship that I found out through my sister Margaret, who's downstairs.
Really?
She would write for my mother to tell me everything was going on, you know. And I found out that because I played basketball against these two kids, they were great guys, you know. And they were both killed. And Ralph knew about 5 or 6 other people because I guess he was from Carlisle.
Sure. Okay. So what made you decide to go into the Navy?
Well, my brother-in-law married my sister Stella. He was in the CBs, and I was still in high school. And when he'd come home on liberty or a leave, I don't know where he was stationed, but I'd see that little white cap sitting there, and I said, I got to have one of these here, you know. And so when I graduated from high school, I asked my mom and dad if they'd sign papers for me to go in. They says, no way. I says, why not? He says, you can't get a job anywhere. They always say you're too thin and you don't weigh enough, you're not tall enough. Now, what makes you think the Navy's going to take you? And another thing, when you was in the Boy Scouts, you went on camping one time and you cried so much they had to come and get you. And now you want to go in the Navy? No way. So I did all my hitchhiking. They said finally agreed to sign papers, but they said you have to do everything on your own. So I hitchhiked, you know, because I didn't have a car at that age. You couldn't afford one. So I hitchhiked to St. Louis Federal Building and took me out to Jefferson Barracks for my exam and everything.
So did you always know you wanted to go in the Navy? Why the Navy? I mean, why instead of not the Marines or the Army or the Air Force?
Well, I thought the Navy, because my brother Oscar was already in the Army, and I was seeing stories about Oscar. You know, sometimes you didn't know if he was going to get a square meal, and he's traveling in mud and rain and everything. And I thought, well, if you're in the Navy, if you get hit, maybe it'll be just one shot and you're gone, you know. But what I didn't mention earlier, I'm glad you brought that up, and I was mentioning about the 55th Squadron, and there was 7 of our ships, and ours was the only one that came back out out of that squadron, but there was more destroyers, but I'm talking about just our personal squadron. Ours was the only one that came back. The others either went aground and got knocked off by gunfire, or they was knocked off by Jap subs, or one way or another, you know, or maybe a typhoon took one of them, you know. But our captain, Lester Wood, was decorated when we came back for not having, it says that we come back into Seattle, and there was a lot of guys from Washington on board the destroyer, and he says, great ship comes back from the war with never having lost a man. You know,
Wow.
I lost all of that stuff in the war, in the fire, later my scrapbook and everything. So,
Wow. So whenever you went into the Navy, what did they do to train you? What sort of training did you have?
well, everybody was going to Chicago, and I was misfortunate being sent to Farragut because it takes you 3 days to get there, you know, by train. And I'll tell you the truth, what my mom and dad was saying about, you know, you couldn't stand to be away when you was in a Boy Scout. I had a lump in my throat already when I was going to Farragut, you know. I mean, I couldn't hardly swallow. And I'm a very picky eater, and I thought I'd starve to death when I got there. But they did train you. It was a tough training. They had a certain area where you used, and I did smoke then, I don't now. But there was a certain time, was a lot of smoke. And it seemed like we was quarantined all the time. Always somebody was sick from. It seemed like every day they was giving you shots or cutting your hair, and you didn't have no hair on your head to begin with. Because when they cut my hair, they says, "What do you? Where you want? Do you want sideburns?" And I said, "Yeah." So they cut them off and put them in your lap, you know. You just seen that picture. It's like a prisoner, you know, because they got the lines in back of your height and everything, you know, and then no hair on your head.
So when did you know you were going to be on the USS Laws? Is that spelled L-A-W-E-S?
Oh, Laws. It's named after an officer in the Navy, you know.
Okay.
That's what destroyers are named after, important people, you know.
Okay.
But I didn't know I was going to be on the Laws until I got to Puget Sound Navy Yard in Bremerton. And then, like, I worked in a post office there, you know, certain mail and things like that in that Navy Yard. And we pulled all our liberties. You'd have to cross the ferry and go over into Seattle. But anyway, I guess I was out there, I'd say 5 or 6 weeks. And then they said, pack up, you know, we're going to take you someplace. And they take you to this pier. They go aboard this ship, you know.
What was your job on the ship?
In a deck force. I was in Division 1 in the deck force. And that is just what it says. Taking care of superstructure, painting, going over the side to paint the side. You know, it's like, I'm trying to think of the name. Deck apes is what they call the deck force, you know, because it was the lowest rank in the Navy, really. I mean, you know, seaman, it isn't nothing dishonorable. It's just that it isn't rated, you don't have a left or right arm rate, you know, like a coxswain or a torpedo man or a gunner's mate or something like that.
So whenever you guys did see action and the alarm for battle station was sounded, what was your role during an attack?
Okay. I might have mentioned that my general quarters station, my regular watch station was up on a bridge, a lookout, and you was in a chair and you'd have binoculars attached to it, and you'd scan from the horizon on up or down and to port. Well, I was on the starboard side, because they got one on each side, but that was my watch station, 8 hours when you was on watch duty. But my battle station, when the battle station alarm, they run off that tat like that, you know, and the bell rings and everything, and then the PA system, man, your battle stations. I had to go down that ladder, 2 decks, and all the way back to the fantail to gun 5.
Wow.
And you have a gun turret there. You know, there was 5 guns on a destroyer.
What size guns were they?
5-inch.
5-inch guns.
And mine was Potterman. So you have a gun captain, you have a trainer, a pointer, a Potterman, and a shellman, and a hot Potterman. And mine was a Potterman. And the back has got a little opening like where the powder can goes, you know. And when you open that, like when, you know, the gun captain, all you do is load the gun. The control up on a bridge fires the gun. That's what the gun captain is for. Gun 5's loaded, ready to fire, and they fire it. You know, they train it, the gun. When you put it in automatic, control's got everything, the pointing and the training both. They do both sections of it. So all you're doing is loading the gun, really. And whenever they say cease fire, you open your hatches up and you can see maybe a Jap. And I tell you, I don't know the feeling that you get. You know, you like want to scream because you're seeing that zero coming down into the water or something like that.
Wow.
You know?
So you actually carried the powder and loaded the.
When you say carried, so you got a magazine below. You're on a turret, so you got a magazine that comes up there. So an elevator brings a 5-inch projectile up. There's 2 of them comes up, depending on, and the fuse and everything is set on them. The powder, it's a little bit on the side of the deck, and it's pushed up through the. Everything is brought up through the magazine. So your powder and your projectile. Powderman goes in first, then the projectile, and then the captain takes over and rams it up into the. What would you call it?
The breech.
Into the breech, and then everything is fired from control. But it is, I can't explain what it's like when they say cease fire and you want to see something because you're inside of a turret and you open them dog hats and you say, and you see that plane coming down, hitting the splashing of water, hitting a drink. It makes you cry.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how heavy were the powder bags?
Well, it was in, the powder was in a can, aluminum can. That's what they. I'm a coin collector, so that's why they took the copper way out of the pennies and gave you lead cents. I don't know if you remember that back in '43.
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
They changed it. They needed that copper. It's a shell, and it's filled with powder. It's about, I'd say it weighs maybe about 25 pounds, something like that, and it's about maybe about 4 foot long and maybe about 6 or 8 inches in diameter. It doesn't feel that heavy when you're loading a gun, you know, and you got your mind on shooting at a plane, you know.
Sure.
You're slapping that dude in there, and then projectile weighs a little bit more. I'd say it weighs, I'm guessing, between 45 and 50 pounds. You know, on a battleship, I've been on a battleship Easter Sunday, and I see everything is done by elevator because everything, you're talking about 16 and 18-inch guns. We was on just a 5-inch.
Sure.
There's a lot of difference.
So, what was the first action that you saw on the ship?
The first action was, I mentioned in my story, we first drew enemy blood at Saipan.
At Saipan.
And we did shore bombarding. And I remember when the island was secured, before it was secured, the Japanese was told not to surrender to the United States because they would kill you and mistreat you and everything. Well, that isn't true, really, you know. American soldiers or sailors don't do that to the prisoners, or the enemy, I should say. But they was, you know, you're in a mountainous area. Saipan and Guam, Tinian, all them islands. We was at all of them. Anyway, you can see them jumping off the mountains with their babies and everything, going into the cliffs, and you can see them floating in the water. You know, because destroyer can go in a lot closer inland than what you can a battleship, you know, and they're a bigger ship, but you can see a lot more. I ain't saying they can't see it, but I'm saying I've seen a lot of them taking their lives jumping because we were told that they would get killed by the Americans if they surrendered.
I remember hearing about that. Yeah. So from there, you said you went from Saipan and Tinian, and you were participated in the Marianas turkey shoot. Is that right?
Yeah, that's all. That's all. The Saipan, that was a great turkey shoot there.
Oh, okay.
Like I said, a lot of the planes was brought down by flat top pilots. I always did think they were the courageous people of the war in the Navy, what I could see of them. Because like I said, when I was on a bridge, on a regular watch, I could look up and say we was refueling off of a flat top because, you know, a smaller ship has to get its fuel and food from someplace else. A battleship or a carrier, there's no transports traveling with you or anything, or oilers or anything like that. So you got to get your food from them. And I'd look up sometimes and see them airplanes landing, you know, and some of them, one time, and then we'd disengage our hoses after refueling or something like that. And one time, I can remember this incident. I can remember looking and watching, waiting for this guy coming back. He must have been shot up. The pilot must have been shot up so bad that he couldn't land on a flat top. And you know what they did? They darkened the ship. That means all lights out. And I always, to this day, I say, I wonder what happened to that pilot. Because, you know, I didn't see him land.
Oh.
You know, it's things like that. that you think about.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that stand out in my mind. What happened to this guy? You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Were you married at the time?
No, I wasn't 18 yet when I
Okay.
went in. I was 17, but I went in August 25th of 43, and the next month I'd have my 18th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So I did have a girlfriend, and I thought it was best if, because she was just as young as me, and I didn't think it'd be best to hold her down to, being true and
Mm-hmm.
maybe not being true.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing was to break all attachments,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I done.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Did you keep in touch with your parents at all?
yeah, my sister Margaret did all because my mother didn't know how to write English,
Okay.
not very fluently,
Mhm.
and neither did my dad.
Mhm.
And my sister Margaret did all her writing, because you can go down there and ask her today what ship I was on. She'd say USS Laws, DD-558,
Mhm.
because she wrote it so many times.
Sure. Now your family, your parents were from Spain, is that right?
Yeah, they both came from Spain when they were small,
Okay.
11 and 13, but they didn't know each other. But they had sponsors in St. Louis,
Mhm.
and that's where they went. And then they met there when they got older,
Mhm.
and they got married, and they moved. My dad said he was as far east as like Indiana and Ohio, and places like that. And then he finally settled in Beckamar at they had a zinc plant there, and that's where he
Wow.
started his family. Well, I shouldn't say started his family, because I'm the only one that was really born in Beckamar. The rest of them, was Indiana or Ohio or Pennsylvania, places like that. Nick, I think, was in Pennsylvania, and Oscar, I'm not sure, but he was not born in Beckamar.
When you were on the ship, how much downtime or free time did you actually have to yourself?
Well, you had quite a bit of time because you had to every day you had to put in an 8-hour watch, 4 on and 4 off, and I would say out of 24 hours, other than the 8 hours, you had no other duties, when you were in the war zone. And their dress code wasn't there when you're in there. You could have short sleeves, whiskers, and I think that's where today's beards and all that, and sideburns and all that comes from, They say it come from during the war, everybody started growing beards and stuff like that. But I had a lot of, on a small ship like that, there was only like, after a shakedown cruise, when I first went on it, there was like 400 people. I didn't have a place to sleep. I slept on a cold deck. A steel deck. It ain't wooden, like a older battleship is. And then after the shakedown, and they brought it down to about 250 people, and then I finally got a bunk.
So there were only 250 men on your destroyer.
It was what?
There were only 250 men on your destroyer?
That's approximate. This was a 2100 class destroyer. It's a 2-stacker, but prior to that they had smaller ships, like they only had 1 stack, and their turrets weren't closed like ours was. We had a closed turret, and they come out with, later I seen ships out there in the Pacific with double mount, 2 barrels. Is that would be the proper term?
I think so. Yeah.
Anyway, it'd be 2 barrels, and ours just had 1, But they changed them. It wasn't a 2100 class anymore.
So did you have any, did you play a lot of cards? What kind was life like on the ship, when you weren't doing your job or on duty?
What was
life like, living on a Navy ship like that?
Well, we picked up Japanese guys that we shot down. We also picked up, I'll often wonder if we picked up Bush, because he was picked up by the drink. Our first president, Bush, was a pilot in the Navy, and he was shot down and hit the drink, because I seen it on the History Channel, and I didn't show the ship, but I was just wondering, because the destroyers, they also, when you picked them up, they'd give you so much ice cream for picking them up. You have to transfer them back after you get them. You got to go to that to a bigger ship, I should say, because there wasn't like a brig or anything on a destroyer. So we played checkers with one of the Japs that we picked up. And he was like about my age, 17 or 18. Maybe 18 or 19, and played checkers. And then the dead ones we picked up, we'd raffle off their guns, and they had all kind of stuff, their caps and their goggles and their little bandanas and all that different stuff, Bonsai.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Mario couldn't get over it when I told her about playing checkers with him, because I still play it today, you know, pretty good at it. But Margaret ain't even good competition.
What was your impression of the Japanese soldiers or pilots that you came across?
Well, I thought they were very well educated, and I think some of them that was maybe a little bit older might have been educated in the United States, you know. But it just seemed like I wasn't facing an enemy when we was playing checkers with this guy. It seemed like, you know, he's your buddy or something like that. But in truth, you know, like you say, each one's fighting for their own country, and they got a cause to do, you know.
Sure. So when you were playing checkers with him, were you in charge of watching him at that time,
Well,
or were you
like I said, we didn't have a brig, and we had a peacoat locker, and we locked him up in the peacoat locker of a night, and like there's two guys, a couple coxswains or boatswain mate, had to do, because we didn't have the type officers, like we didn't have Ralph, a Marine, the seagoing bellhop or anything. I know Ralph did. I told him, I said I didn't mean anything by it, you know. But anyway, you're locked up in a brig, and then after you get in contact, you know, and they communicate with different bigger ships, and we put him later on to a flat top, transferred him to a flat top.
Okay. So when did you actually? So as you progressed through the war and everything, where were you on VJ Day?
Victory in Japan. We was at Okinawa. I didn't even mention Okinawa, did I? Earlier. That was our last station. We was our 6th day minus D-Day. In other words, we went into we screened the underwater demolition team to clear the beachhead for the landing into Okinawa.
Wow.
And so, you know, it was really nothing. It was because, you know, you're not firing or anything. You're just protecting or helping get the job ready for the waves that's going to be coming in. So that's where we was at on D-Day, -6. And then on when I remember writing to Margaret and telling her on April 1st, the eggs are really going to be falling, you know, and referring to Easter Sunday. I was telling her we was going to be, but if you said you was going to be there, it would be cut out,
censored,
you know.
and everything.
It'd be censored, yeah, which it had to be, because Margaret said, I got a lot of your letters. It was hard to read because
you're talking in code.
It was everything was cut.
Oh,
there was a lot of censor in it. You know, Doyle was our censor, and what was you? I forgot what you.
Well, where were you on VJ Day?
At Okinawa, and so then on Easter Sunday we started shore bombarding, and the guy that was a very good painter. He painted on the director, you know, that does actually the firing of all 5-inch guns. He painted the double engine planes and the single engine planes, Bettys and all that. And the ships that we sunk in Mindanao, he had that all on there. Then on another one, he had an island painted on there, and it had Okinawa, 28,500 rounds fired at Okinawa. So that isn't done in a couple days. It's like 3 months firing, you know.
Wow.
And then one day, there was shells hitting, bullets, not shells destroying it. You know, you could hear ping, ping. And guys on the island was celebrating. What they celebrating? Finally, they put over the PA system. The war's over. The war's over.
And bullets were hitting your ship?
Yeah, but you know, guys was celebrating on the island. You know what I mean? We wasn't that far off the island. Like I said, you could always sit in close where you dropped anchor. A lot of times they call us the lucky lady. We'd drop anchor in a harbor someplace, and then we'd get orders to go to another buoy, and we'd move, and the ship had pulled into our previous docking, would get blowed up or something like that. You know, maybe a submarine came in, or maybe a Kamikaze or somebody hit them and knocked them off, you know. But anyway, that's when we were told the war was over.
Wow.
That day, like, I think we're talking about like something like 3 months after Easter Sunday. That'd be March, April, May, somewhere in May, you know, when it was over with. So that, man, now we're going into Japan. We got orders to go to Uncle Sugar.
Uncle Sugar.
Uncle Sugar is code for U.S.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
So that's the way the community say, we're headed back to Uncle Sugar. I remember that because I'd take them all after they was done. They'd throw them in a basket. I'd say I had all that stuff in my scrapbook, and I lost all that stuff in a fire later on.
So in victory in Europe, were you in Okinawa then, or in victory in Japan were you in Okinawa? On VE Day was May 8th of 45, and VJ Day was September 2nd.
Yeah.
So were you where were you for like VE Day, for instance?
VE Day, you say that was May?
That was May the 8th, I think.
We might have been, I don't know if it'd be Iwo Jima or someplace like that.
That would have been really close to the landing
and
of
also,
Iwo Jima or Okinawa.
Also, I got a letter from Margaret when she told me that Oscar was a prisoner of war because they haven't heard from him. Because Oscar and I wrote back and forth to one another while he was in the Army and I was in the Navy, you know. And I, you know how you have that feeling like in your mind and say, it's been a long time since I got a letter. I wonder if there's something wrong. And then it wasn't long after that, Margaret had wrote and told me that Oscar was a prisoner of war. And I got a holy picture with his name and everything praying for him, you know, he'd be safe. But I remember that day real well. But no, we was, I would say, Iwo Jima or maybe the Battle of Philippines, somewhere in that area, because I didn't mention it, but our ship and our fleet that was traveled in Task Force 30 or 58 won 10 battle stars. We had 8 on the Asiatic Pacific, and we had 2 for the Philippine Liberation. And then the rest of American theater can't carry a star or anything. And then also had the Victory Medal.
So you came back to the U.S. after that. When you got back to the U.S., were you off of the ship from then on? When were you actually discharged?
Okay, well, when we was in San Diego, and our ship was put into, like, they attached like 8, maybe a dozen ships, and they put them in what they call mothball operation. And you know, they cover them all up because the war is over, and they're trying to preserve the gun mounts, the barrels, and like anything it might fire, you know, a lot of things under decks, something like that. And from there, they kept a skeleton crew to take care of all of them ships, you know, and they sent us to Fort Donelson, I think it was, where we was being mustered. And we went out like on a point system. And you'd get so many points for time overseas, for being married, different things like that. Well, I was single, you know, and I had guys that came in after I came in that was discharged before me because they got their points.
Sure.
I went out on 32.5 points, and I was sent to Lambert Field in St. Louis where I was discharged. And I hitchhiked all the way, because I'm telling you, that was my way of travel back then. And I hitchhiked, and from St. Louis I got to Breeze, and I says, well, it's only 5 miles to Beckemeyer, and I'll walk it if I have to. I walked every mile of it back home. I couldn't get picked up. And I had a sea bag in my uniform.
No one picked you up. That's too bad.
It isn't like today. A lot of people, you know, even when we went to the memorial for dedication for the Navy dedication, and there was a lot of guys from different wars that come up to you, or people, because I had my cap on with the name of the ship and everything, DD-558, and they'd come up to you and they'd shake hands and say, thanks for serving, and things like that. It really made you feel good. And we did the same thing to Vietnam and Korean. We visited both of them places. That's the first time we'd seen them. That Vietnam War was really long. I can't believe there's that many lives that was lost there.
Sure, yeah. So you actually got out at what year? Was it 1945?
I was discharged in March 26th of 46. And that's about the time that explosion I was telling you about in Centray happened. About that.
Oh, yeah, the mining explosion?
Yeah, it happened, I think, a year to the day that I was discharged, because I told my mother, I said, you know, a year ago today, I was discharged from the Navy, and I says, and now they had this mine disaster.
Oh, my gosh. What did you go on to do as a career after the war?
Well, I drew I got severance pay, you know, every month. They gave me $100 when I was left the Navy, and then every month they'd give me $100, which is a total of $300. And then Illinois paid a bonus. I forget what it was, but from after I got that money, then I started drawing unemployment because jobs wasn't that plentiful back then. And I tell you what, if you lived in Beckamar, there's no jobs there, other than a mining place, and a smelter, which a mining that was closed, and a smelter that was it hired maybe 55 or 60 people. So all my jobs was in the St. Louis McDonnell aircraft, places like that. And I wound up one time going to Peoria to the Caterpillar plant. I was talking to Ralph about that. He said that whole area where I worked is gone now. It's in a different locations. So I drew a lot of unemployment, and then I went into small jobs around there. Driving a truck is the last job I had in Beckamar, and then I moved closer to where I retired from, Laclede Steel and Alton. That's where I retired from.
I see.
I put in 28 years there.
Oh, okay, good. Did you use the benefits of the GI Bill at all?
No, I used it with my brother Oscar. He had a cabinet business, and I guess I worked maybe before I went to Peoria. I think I decided to go to Peoria then. I worked for Oscar maybe about, I'm thinking maybe close to a year or something like that. And business might have dropped off a little bit, and we thought it best, if I went on my own trying to find a job somewhere else. And I think I went to Caterpillar then. But I had a lot of different jobs because they weren't that plentiful.
Sure.
Until I got on at Laclede.
Did you continue any of the relationships that you made with some friends of yours in the military after the war?
The closest ones were in Indiana, and we corresponded for quite some time. And his name was Savoy, and we picked him up a second. Sometimes when guys get sick or something like that, they take him off the ship, and you come back into Pearl for something. And this guy came aboard there, and we became real close friends, and we pulled all liberties and everything, and we corresponded with postcards and letters, through the years. And then, I don't know, for some reason, maybe after I got married or something like that, all correspondence was dropped. And then I did see him when I went to Laws reunion in Kansas City a couple of years ago. I seen they had a list of those that were deceased and those addresses, everybody that served on the Laws, and I seen his name, and then I wrote him a letter. But
good. Yeah.
I don't know, I never got a response.
How did your military experiences? Did it affect you at all? And is it the sort of thing that stuck with you the rest of your life?
Well, the only thing I know is I'm proud that I was able to serve as a privilege. Even if it was wartime, it was a privilege to serve in the Navy and fight for my country. And I'm proud that I was a Navy veteran.
That's great. As far as the experiences that stand out after all this time, you mentioned earlier some of those experiences. Are there anything besides, some of the battle experiences? Are there any experiences with buddies of yours that stand out? Good times.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned friends. While you mention it again, I thought of this guy. We did boots together, and his name was White, and last name was White, and he was from Dupo, Illinois, which is south of St. Louis. And we did a lot of correspondence, and we did boots together, and we got split up after boots because I went to Puget Sound, and then I got a hold of his address again because he was corresponding with my sister Stella, and I got his address again, and he was assigned to a hospital ship. So that's the last I heard of him. I always think Dupo isn't that far south, and I always think of if he's still living there, things like that. I mentioned it to Morgan when we go down 255, and say, I often wonder about Wyatt, if he's still living there or what, So there isn't a lot of people. I guess that's why I don't make a lot of the reunions. Next year they're going to Washington. Margaret wants to go there because she wants to see the memorial again because we get a real good look of it. But there isn't too many people in this area that I was close to, and there's not too many people left on the Laws. I'm 79, and there's a lot of them that. One thing, a lot of them didn't get to see that memorial, it is something that I think more people that was served should have been able to see it.
It
My
should have
brother
been
is
done
one of
50
them.
years ago.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
You know, looking back and seeing the importance of how important World War II was to the U.S. What do you think is one of the most important things that came from World War II? I mean, are there any things you saw that that came out of World War II that's been real important to the United States? I know a lot of people. There's a lot of technology that came out of World War II.
Oh, yeah.
But is there anything that you kind of saw from the war that you think has really affected, the way of life in the United States or anything like that?
Well, I can't think of any.
Yeah.
Right now, if I give that question a little bit of thought, I might be able to come up with an answer.
Oh, that's fine. How do you think that serving in the war, did the experiences affect your life at all? I mean, did it affect your values or your morals? Or did it affect your view on war or anything like that?
Well, it's got a big effect on the war that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry. I feel sorry for. I shouldn't. Maybe that sorry isn't the proper word, but the boys that are serving in Iraq right now. Mm-hmm. My opinion is, there's a lot of young families that's never going to. They've lost their. They ain't going to be able to see their children or their girlfriends or their anything like that. Mm-hmm. It kind of hurts to see them fighting right now. I got my granddaughter's got a boyfriend that's in Indiana right now, and he's just about getting ready to get shipped to Iraq, and I worry for him and everybody that's serving over there.
Mm-hmm.
I really do, because maybe I shouldn't say this, but I feel like we shouldn't be in this war. That's my personal opinion.
That's fine. Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like there's a lot of lives being lost. It's over. When this war started, Bush said, they asked him about casualties, he said there won't be none. We're over 1,000 some people it's lost already, Mm-hmm. And they're young guys. That's how the war has affected me. I think about what they have to go through, and losing their lives is what really hurts, mm-hmm. because they won't see their families anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're pretty much wrapped up. I mean, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I appreciate Ryan, the chance to say something on TV, and I'm going to be able to hear what I said. I'll probably think I really made a messed up job of it, but I appreciate it.
Well, on behalf of everyone I know and in the United States of America, we appreciate your service in the war, and the victory in World War II, in my opinion, has made America the superpower that it is today, and the reason we have the influence and the power that we do in the world today is, in my opinion, a direct result of those 4 years that guys like you put in.
Like Tom Brokaw says, the greatest generation.
I fully agree with that. So, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
He says that's my thoughts anyway. That's what Tom Brokaw says.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Okay.